Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So firstly, I'd like to thank Andreas and his organizing team for making it possible for me to be here today. And it is my pleasure and a privilege to be a guest of this land and to be given the opportunity to share an important aspect of my research with you today. I'm also deeply honored and grateful to the Jagad ancestors and the community elders who have played a very crucial role in my research thus far. So I'd like to move straight into my presentation. So just a few definitions to make it clear and to distinguish it from agroecology. So indigenous agroecology is a subset of agroecology. It is the dynamic and sustainable management of ecosystems according to traditional knowledge and practices. And it is characterized by the use of diverse and locally adapted crops, agroforestry, soil and water management techniques, to name a few. And it is related to strong social and cultural values, prioritizing community well-being, equity, and the preservation of traditional knowledge. And I'll be going more into this. So with indigenous agroecology, there are important linkages which we need to keep in mind. And this is from the literature that's out there. So indigenous well-being is very closely related to indigenous cosmology. And there is a very close interlinking between land, kinship, and spirit. And land is viewed as more than a physical resource, as opposed to the current view on agriculture, which is I would say resource-based, and it's all about extraction. And it holds spiritual, cultural, and ancestral significance. And indigenous peoples often have a profound connection to their traditional lands, considering them as living entities with inherent rights and values. The land is seen as a provider of resources and a source of identity, and its stewardship is a communal responsibility. In terms of the environment and environment, indigenous communities have developed ecological knowledge and practices through long-term interactions with their environment. And they possess intricate knowledge of local ecosystems, including plant and animal species, seasonal patterns, and ecological relationships. And culture as well, which is closely linked to spirit and kinship, plays a central role in indigenous agroecology. And traditional knowledge, rituals, ceremonies, and oral histories are closely related also to the traditional practices of many indigenous communities. So I would like to speak in the context of the Orang Asli of Malaysia. Orang Asli means the original people. There are 18 subgroups, and I am looking at one subgroup who are the Jahats, the Sengon. And the thing is, I would like to talk about why this is an important topic for me, because the indigenous people of Malaysia, especially Peninsular Malaysia, they have been disenfranchised, marginalized, and dislocated. And it is an ongoing internal colonization. So they have left behind in terms of development, and there are only about 180,000 of them. And their situation is very discouraging at this point. They are an underserved and understudied group. So my community of interest are the Jahats. They are, as I said earlier, they are under the Senoi subdivision. They are located in and around Krau Forest and Wildlife Reserve in Pahang, which is a protected area, and therefore it is they are living on contested land. So there is a lot of conflict with the state. There are only 14 villages of Jahats, and there is a total of about 5,500 people. And their socio-economic and agricultural activities include small-scale subsistence farming, which is, I would be using this term interchangeably, Sweden farming or hill rice cultivation, and home gardens. And they are also practicing cash crop such as rubber and oil palm. So my research questions, there are 3 of them. What are the traditional farming or food production systems of the Jahad? And are they agroecological in nature? What are the social, political, and cultural factors that impact the continuity of Jahad agroecological practices? And to what extent do these practices contribute towards the Jahad food security and food sovereignty? As for methods, I carried out an agricultural practices survey on 104 households across 3 villages. These are semi-structured questionnaires. And I used the modified idea method, which is a method to assess farm sustainability in terms of indicators, and to assess and also looking at the factors affecting Jahad agricultural practices. And data analysis is descriptive statistics and Kruskal-Wallis chi-square test for farm sustainability indicators, looking across 4 different categories. So the consideration here is that all 104 households were taken as a single sample because there were no significant differences in the agricultural practices between the 3 villages. So a little about the idea method. The method that I used was adapted from ZAM and Lance 2008. It's widely adopted by farmers, particularly in France and the European region. Researchers, policymakers, it is a standardized and comprehensive approach. So the original method has 41 indicators, but I have utilized 31 with a lot of modifications to suit local conditions. So there are 3 dimensions: agroecological, socio-territorial, and economic. And there are, as I said, a total of 31 indicators, and the total scores for these are about 109. So going into the socioeconomic data that I found out, so the main socioeconomic activity is actually cash cropping, which is the source of livelihood for the villagers. It comes from rubber and oil palm, with oil palm providing a bigger portion of the income. And shifting cultivation or Sweden farming is practiced mostly for subsistence, meaning it's consumed and it's not really it's not a part of the livelihood. As you can see here, the median income from Sweden farming is practically 0. And the most of it comes from oil palm and rubber. And a little about their mean monthly income. It is just slightly above the hardcore poor level scale that Malaysia has. So most of these communities, they are, I would say they are existing at the poverty level. So the important thing about Jahad agroecology is that you can't separate it from their spirit, their kinship, and their links to ancestors. There are 3 important components, and the Sweden farming or hill rice cultivation or shifting cultivation it cannot be separated from these 3 elements, and I'll show you how it comes together. So in terms of cosmology, the Jahads are very much linked to their ancestors, and they are guided by their ancestors through dreams. And their relationship with the land is very close. And in terms of nature and land, they view nature and the environment as non-human living entities. And society and culture plays a very important role in their farming systems. And these relationships are important, and they are underpinned by taboos and practices and social norms. So going into the results of the sustainability assessment that I had carried out. So the 4 categories I looked at is oil palm, rubber, shifting cultivation, and home gardens. So home gardens is also an important component of traditional agriculture for the Jahads. And if you see from here, the mean scores are not very different for all of the 4 categories. They are rather similar. However, when we look at the indicator level, it is significantly different. So out of the 31 indicators, I found that there were significant differences for 17 indicators
across the categories. And a little about traditional agriculture from my assessment, as this is to differentiate it from rubber cash crops, rubber and oil palm cultivation. So for traditional agriculture, the only thing that's different from the olden practice, practice from the old days is there is a use of herbicide, which is a new introduction. And but the main issue is access to land, agricultural land. There is a problem with land tenure. Okay, the problem with this is because they are living on contested land. Therefore, with the expanding population, there is not much land available for agriculture. And so they are not able to, so when you're comparing livelihood, cash crop cultivation for livelihood and subsistence agriculture, I find that the tendency is to opt more for cash crop. There is a transformation to plant more cash crops rather than traditional agriculture, because it directly impacts their livelihoods. And although there is still practice, they are still planting hill rice, it is not sufficient to provide food for their families. And as I said earlier, there is no contribution to their livelihoods. And oops. Sorry, no worries. You have 5 more minutes, which is fine. Okay, looks like I need to rush. Okay. Right. Okay, so the main indicators for sustainability of shifting cultivation is land tenure, farm sustainability, perception of farm existence over the next 10 years, feed production, and community cooperation. These are the important components without which there is a very high probability that it will no longer be in existence within the next few years. And in terms of household food security, for a community that used to be completely self-sufficient, within one generation, they have become dependent on market purchase, whereby only there is about 98% of all respondents have said that it is what they produce on their own is not sufficient, and the rest is purchased from the market or foraged from wild food resources. Okay, so these are the important factors which play a role on whether traditional agriculture is going to continue with these communities. And land comes up as a huge factor because of all of these components. And there is no recognition of customary land rights by the state. Encroachment on indigenous land is happening almost on a daily basis. There is a lot of contestation over land use, as I've said before, and increased conversion from traditional farming to cash cropping to support livelihoods, resettlement policies by the government. So this is a huge problem because the community identifies itself with the land. So when they are resettled, they are not able to have a sense of themselves anymore. And therefore, it is a huge displacement, not just in terms of physical, but spiritual, and in terms of their sense of being as well. And in terms of social territorial, traditional agriculture is labor intensive. It requires a community effort, and it may not appeal to the young generation, which is why I have concluded that it may not be sustainable. And there is a loss of heirloom seeds when planting is discontinued for more than 18 months. So their seed can be stored for a maximum of 18 months, after which it becomes not viable. And there is an encroachment of modern life. And all of these factors, environmental is climate change and unpredictable weather patterns, which is being witnessed more rampantly over the last 2 years, in fact. So these interfere with planting patterns and pest management systems. So all of these factors are actually leading to a loss of indigenous knowledge, well-being, identity, and very importantly, links to the ancestors. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that the practice of ancient food systems of the jungle is decreasing at an alarming rate and may become extinct within the next generation. And therefore, policies and strategies that recognize and support indigenous knowledge systems and practices are crucial for building a more sustainable and inclusive agricultural system. And I think what is more important here that I want to say is that the fact that their close relationship to the land and to their ancestors, that is something that we have lost as a humanity, and that makes their worldview unique, and it makes their entire approach to farming very sustainable. However, because of these external factors, external actors, it has rendered the entire practice not sustainable. However, the practice itself is sustainable. So I think the thing is, the most important thing for the community, if it wants to keep its traditional practices, its identity and its well-being, it's important to ensure that the land tenure issue is resolved. Okay, and some views about the idea method that I used. So I found this to be a very a convenient method for assessment, quick assessment, because there is a lot of room to play around with, and you can adapt it to local needs. However, there is just one advantage. It does not account for social and cultural factors, such as the role of farming in local communities and traditional knowledge systems. However, I made up for this difference by by getting in qualitative inputs and analyzing those as well. So it is complementary. And that's it for today.
Thank you for the nice presentation. Just quickly, your findings seem to be influenced by the view of classical economists like Malthus, who talks about population growth and the land is limited, you know. But nowadays we talk about beyond the limit, you know, land productivity could be improved. And that's why we're talking about agroecology, sustainable intensification, and so on. So what's your view on this?
Okay, so if we were to keep the practice system intact as how it is being done, the important thing is there is land. It is not a matter of that there is no land, but they do not have access to the land. So this is a policy issue. This is a state issue, and it is a law because of the protected area. However, they have been existing on that land for thousands of years. So there is no resolution on that contestation. So it's not a matter of a lack of land. The land is there, but they are not having access to the land. Yeah. So I think that has to happen at the political level, and there needs to be engagement with the community, but that's not happening in Malaysia right now.